Number 10. Wheelchair for life. In Brazil, a 20-year-old girl was left in a wheelchair after suffering a bacterial infection from a nose piercing. Sadly, she'll never walk again. And all because she wanted to get a small piece of metal stuck through her nose, just like pretty much every single one of her friends. Her name is Leanne Diaz, and she got her nose pierced in July of 2018. After she did it, the piercing bled and got a little swollen, but she just thought that was normal. Then she saw a spot on her nose, a rather big one that made her nose look bright red, like Rudolph the reindeer. The spot was followed by a fever, which was then followed by an outstanding pain in both her legs. Things got worse still. The pain gradually shifted to a feeling of numbness throughout her entire body, to the point where she couldn't walk anymore. And throughout this whole ordeal, doctors were struggling to give a proper diagnosis. It wasn't until they discovered bacteria in her bloodstream, something called Staphylococcus aureus, that they were able to figure out what was going on. Here's where things got really gross. She was given an MRI scan at the hospital, which showed she had 500 milliliters of pus compressing 3 of her vertebrae in her spinal cord. She literally had pus in her spine, causing her to be paralyzed. She couldn't feel anything at this point from her chest down. She underwent emergency surgery, which she managed to stop the infection from spreading. But it couldn't save her legs. It saved her life, but now she's stuck in a wheelchair. And what's really crazy is that the neurosurgeon who did the surgery, a guy named Oswaldo Ribeiro Marquez, told local news he had never seen that kind of an infection in his 15 years of practicing medicine. Number 9. The wrong nipple. Nikki Belza has spent over $22,000 throughout her life to enhance her chest. She went from a 32A at the age of 21 to a 32 triple D at the age of 33. But it would be a nipple piercing that almost killed Nikki, something super simple and super cheap, and supposedly safe. A few weeks after Nikki got her left nipple pierced, she accidentally ripped the bar out of it. Pain on the left side of her chest became so unbearable that she collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. But it turned out there was a bunch of different factors at play here. Doctors told her that she had gotten streptococcal A from her husband, but what should have been a normal bacterial infection triggered sepsis. Because she had just accidentally ripped out her nipple piercing, the sepsis spread into her breast and ravaged the tissue there. The sepsis was so bad that it literally ate her flesh to the point where doctors had to remove her implant, leaving her with a 32 triple D on one side and nothing on the other. Number 8. Ear growths. Jennifer from Philadelphia was 18 years old when she went through a procedure that most teens in America go through without having any trouble. She got her ears pierced, but after she got the piercings, her ears became infected and she was left with huge and terrifying ugly growths protruding from the sides of her head. These growths were so big and so heavy that they actually gave her headaches and caused her to suffer from vertigo, aka severe dizziness. Jennifer had 4 growths in total, 2 on each ear. When she went to the hospital, the doctors told her there was nothing they can do to help. So she had to seek help from a specialist, Dr. Sandra Lee. Sandra was able to diagnose Jennifer with extreme keloids. This is a type of scarring that happens with minor skin damage. Basically, the piercings on her ears scarred over, and those scars continued to grow out of control. The only way to get rid of them was with surgery. But this surgery was not simple. The doctor had to remove a huge amount of Jennifer's ear tissue and then use skin grafts to reshape her ears so that she didn't look like some kind of deformed elf. And to make things worse, this wasn't a cure for the keloids. Jennifer had to continue with a course of radiation therapy to keep the keloids from coming back. The only good news is that at least she had the growths gone and no longer suffers from devastating headaches. Number 7. A deadly DIY. A schoolgirl in Brazil died from an infection after a botched DIY eyebrow piercing. Her name was Isabela Eduarda de Souza, just 15 years old. She worked up the courage to give herself the eyebrow piercing, but seeing as she wasn't a professional and had never done it before, things went terribly wrong. The only reason she did it herself was because her parents had refused to allow her to get one professionally. She felt that the only way she could have the eyebrow piercing she so desperately craved was by jamming a needle through her face, all by herself. Well, the needle she pushed through her eyebrow gave her an infection. 3 days after the risky procedure, her eyebrows started to swell. But by the time she finally decided to seek medical attention at the hospital, it was too late. She was rushed into an emergency room where she suffered 4 heart attacks in a row. She was then transferred to a special hospital, put on a ventilator, and passed on just shortly after. It might be worth quickly mentioning that this is probably the worst piercing to try and do yourself. An eyebrow piercing done improperly can not only cause a deadly infection, but can cause nerve damage that will mess up your face for the rest of your life. Number 6. A ruptured face. Tammy Caulfield almost bled to death because of a cheek piercing. She was rushed to the hospital after collapsing face first on the pavement and then choking on her own blood. Doctors had to carry out an emergency operation, with one of the medics comparing her injury to that of a gunshot wound. When the doctors finally saved her life, they informed her that the reason for her troubles was that the cheek piercing had ruptured an artery in her face. The ruptured artery caused her to lose roughly 4 pints of blood. And to give you a good comparison of just how much blood that is, the average person has between 6 and 7 pints of blood in her body. This means she lost over half of her entire blood stock through a hole in her cheek. Would you dare get your cheek pierced, knowing there's a possibility that you could rupture an artery and bleed to death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. Losing an ear. Bianca Hart, 18 years old from England, got a stud put in the top of her right ear. It was a quick procedure that cost about $10 right before the start of university. Several days later, she began to experience excruciating pain right in the area where she'd gotten the piercing. Clearly, it had become infected. She went back to the piercing studio to have the stud replaced with a small silver bar, but that didn't fix the problem. 2 weeks later, she was rushed to the emergency room. The first thing doctors did was cut her ear open. They thought her ear was full of pressure from the infection, and she needed it to be released. But after they made the cut, they realized the infection had been wreaking devastation for the past 2 weeks. It had eaten most of the cartilage on Bianca's ear. They then had to cut off the top part of her ear and put her on morphine for a week to ease the pain. In the end, Bianca was lucky that she didn't lose her entire ear. She's still stuck with just part of an ear for the rest of her life. But at least she finally got the infection taken care of. When she arrived for her first day of university, Bianca did so with a bandage wrapped around her head. So, that was probably pretty embarrassing. Number 4. Playground piercings. Parents are being warned of a deadly new craze on school playgrounds across the country in which teens are almost dying from giving themselves fake body piercings. The craze came from none other than TikTok, where teenagers learned that they can give themselves fake tongue piercings using magnetic ball bearings. But instead of getting the look they want, many of those youngsters are accidentally swallowing the ball piercings, causing bowel perforation and intestinal blockage. According to Sanja Bezarovic, a pediatric surgeon at Hull and East Yorkshire hospitals, 3 children nearly died in just a few weeks from attempting their very own tongue piercings. One of them was a 9-year-old boy, with another being just 12 years old. In the case of Freddie Webster, 12, he had to have 10 centimeters of his bowel removed in an emergency operation after he swallowed several magnetic ball bearings. These ball bearings ripped a hole right through his stomach. He had put the ball bearings in his cheek and then attached a metal object on the outside of his cheek, making it look like he had a piercing. But when he tried to remove the ball bearings in his mouth, 2 of them slipped down his throat. Within just 5 minutes, he began to experience stomach pain. The pain became so severe that he was rushed to the hospital, where he was taken immediately into surgery. And while all 3 of these recent cases were lucky, with the kid surviving, doctors are warning parents that the next kid may not be so fortunate. Number 3. Nightmare at Claire's. A 6-year-old girl named Lily begged her mother to get her ears pierced. Her mother, Susie Nesbitt, had gotten her first piercing as a child. All Lily's friends had piercings. It didn't seem like a big deal. The mother took her daughter to the store Claire's to get the piercing done. Lily was excited, and she would finally be able to wear jewelry in her ears just like all her friends. But of course, that's not the end of the story. 3 weeks after the piercing, Lily's earrings refused to come out. Her mother had been cleaning her ear with special liquid and hadn't tried to take the earring out. But during those 3 weeks, the earring had embedded itself underneath the young girl's skin, something that's definitely not supposed to happen. Lily had to go to the hospital and be given local anesthetic so the doctors could cut the earring out of her scalpel. Ouch. The girl was totally fine in the end, just a bit traumatized and no longer interested in getting anything pierced. After all, having to get your first piercing carved out of your ear on an operating table would put anybody off the trend. Number 2. Fulminant liver failure. A woman from Queens in New York City decided to treat herself for the holidays. She got herself a small diamond nose ring as a gift from herself to herself. Shortly after, Dana Smith was rushed to the hospital, barely alive. According to what Dana told CBS New York, she lost her appetite in the week following the implant of a small diamond stud just over her left nostril. Shortly after, she began to experience stomach pain, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, she was too scared to go to the hospital. She waited until it felt like she was actually going to die before she took herself to the emergency room. And by that time, her liver had already began to fail. She was put into a medically induced coma and diagnosed with fulminant liver failure. When Dana woke up from her coma, she was informed that the infection from her simple diamond stud had gotten so bad that they had to give her a liver transplant while she was asleep. Dana had only thought she had a stomach flu. She had no idea when she went to the hospital that she was just days away from her liver failing and her dropping dead. And number 1, a bad birthday present. According to Amanda Taylor's family, she wanted a tongue piercing so that she could look like her favorite pop star, Pink. It was also Amanda's birthday, and her family was happy to pay for the piercing as a special gift. But it turned out to be the worst birthday present ever because Amanda died from blood poisoning just 2 days later. Amanda was 34 years old when she collapsed, all because of a tiny steel bar shoved through her tongue. The day before, she wrote in a Facebook post that she felt like garbage. The day before that, she had visited Silverhand Jewelry in the city of Cardiff to have the stud put in. Then her tongue became swollen. She came down with a sore throat, and when she went to see the doctor, she was prescribed penicillin. The doctor thought she had tonsillitis, but when she got home, she died from septicemia and acute tonsillitis. Public health officials investigated the jewelry store she had gotten the piercing from, only to find that they had unhygienic practices. Go figure. Amanda Taylor died because the people that gave her the piercing were dirty, and the piercing got infected with bacteria. But of course, the jewelry store insists that they followed a very strict hygiene protocol. In the end, nobody was convicted, and Amanda Taylor was buried 6 feet under.
10. Rampage at Gold's Gym. In October of 2011, a New York weightlifter entered a Gold's Gym and went on a terrifying rampage. His name was Chad Brothers, 32 years old. He walked into the gym, started trashing the place, and then had a heart attack after the cops used a taser on him to quell his violent frenzy. According to Police Chief Pierre Haidari, Chad had attacked a female officer and assaulted a gym goer. And the only way to settle the hulking mania was with a shock of electricity. But let's back things up to the start. The police were initially called after Chad punched a man who was running on a treadmill. The guy was literally just minding his own business, and Chad went up and socked him. He then lost his mind, started destroying weight machines, throwing office equipment around, and chucking dumbbells across the room. When a female officer showed up and realized she was dealing with a man hopped up on steroids, she had no choice but to jolt him with a taser. But even after being hit once, Chad didn't slow down. Multiple officers had to shoot him with their tasers, shocking him 4 or 5 times and beating him with a baton before he was finally subdued. Now, nobody gets hit with a taser that many times without some serious damage. Once he was subdued, the cops rushed him to Albany Medical Center, but he died from cardiac arrest at 7:15 in the morning. Nobody knows what triggered the incident, but experts believe steroids had thrown him into an angry delirium. 9. Tearing a muscle. At the beginning of 2021, Ryan Big Rig Crowley had one of the worst days at the gym ever. The winner's pectoral muscle tore right off his bone. Ouch! He didn't just tear his muscle, it literally detached itself from his skeleton. Ryan and his friend Larry Wheels, also a power lifter, were pumping iron at a local gym in Dubai when they started egging each other on. Ryan amped himself up and added an extra 88 pounds to his bench press, totaling a weight of 485 pounds. That extra huge chunk of weight was just too much for his body to handle. He tore his muscle on video right in the middle of his bench press. In the disturbing footage, you can even see Ryan's pectoral tendon jutting out of his skin from where it had been ripped off the bone. He collapsed on the floor in agony and was rushed to the hospital. His whole arm was covered in bruises, all the way down his torso. This wasn't an injury that Ryan could just walk away from. Doctors had to completely reconstruct his pec, and it will take a considerable amount of time to recover. 8. Carjacking gone wrong. In June of 2021, a grandmother was shot and killed outside a Houston gym as she was trying to walk in the front door. Two suspects ambushed 62-year-old Elsa Mikiska as she arrived for her 5 o'clock exercise class. It was the first thing in the morning, the sun was still down, and these two scumbags were lurking in the parking lot, waiting to rob somebody. They had driven up in a white Chevrolet SUV just before 5 o'clock, then waited for the grandmother to get out of her vehicle. It was just supposed to be a robbery, but when Elsa realized what was happening, she bolted for the front doors. The thieves were caught by surprise, and they opened fire on her, filling her with bullets before she could even enter the gym. The tragedy shook the community to its core and positively devastated Elsa's family. The two suspects got away at first, but were quickly apprehended and have since been charged with capital murder. Both of the suspects were juveniles. One was just 16 years old. Regardless of their age, both are likely to spend their entire adult lives locked behind bars. 7. Dead and missing. In late January of 2022, a young woman in California said she was going to the gym. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. According to the Oceanside Police Department, Sarah Otero, 28 years old, was last seen early in the morning on January 28th. She left her mother's house claiming she was going to meet a friend and work out together. But when she never returned home and her parents reached out to the friend, they said they were unaware of plans. The family was a little panicked, but hoping their daughter had maybe just taken some time for herself down at the beach. When she didn't show up for work later on, something she had never done, her family was immediately worried. They called the police and reported her missing. 2 weeks after she vanished, Sarah's body was found. Police first discovered her vehicle at a greasy rest stop on Interstate 5. When they searched the area, they uncovered her corpse at the bottom of a cliff, which happens to be in a restricted training area of a Marine Corps base camp. Here's where things get really strange. The Oceanside police claimed that they found nothing suspicious about her death when all the facts we have point to something extremely suspicious going on. First of all, the friend she was supposed to go to the gym with. Why did she lie about it? Or was it the friend that was lying? And another thing, Sarah was in a romantic relationship with someone she had only met over Zoom calls. This is also a little weird. The police may not suspect foul play, but it seems unlikely that Sarah lied about going to the gym only to fall off the edge of a cliff near an interstate bathroom. 6. Crushed by a barbell. During the Christmas season of 2016, Kyle Thompson, a man of just 22 years old, went to the gym to work out in central Iowa. He frequented the Elite Edge Transformation Center in Ankeny, about 10 miles from Des Moines. It was an ordinary Monday morning and Kyle was working out with a barbell. Everything went terribly wrong in the blink of an eye when the barbell slipped from his hand and crushed his neck. Mark Yance, a spokesman for the gym, said in a statement that Kyle was bench pressing 315 pounds at the time of the accident. There had been people spotting the Iowa State University student when the barbell slipped, but none of them were fast enough to grab the bar before it landed on his throat. They were able to get the thing off him, but the damage had already been done. An ambulance was called and Kyle was taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead from his injuries. That much weight falling directly on his throat was just too devastating to come back from. It was like an elephant stepping on his neck. And it wasn't even like he didn't know what he was doing. Kyle was a sharp guy. He was fit. He knew exactly how to properly work out. It was simply a freak accident, a horrible thing that could honestly happen to anyone. 5. Brutal security guard assault. A security guard at a gym in Mesquite, Texas, was just doing his job when he ended up dead. According to the police, 43-year-old Patrick Prejean got into a physical altercation with a group of men at the gym in January of 2022. It happened at a fitness connection on Town East Boulevard. We don't know exactly what the pair were arguing about, but it got extremely heated. Witnesses say 3 men attacked the security guard and beat him viciously, to the point where he was lying unresponsive on the floor. The trio took off running, bystanders called the police, and Patrick was whisked to the hospital. Sadly, he died from his injuries. The police investigation led them to 3 men in their 20s, all from Georgia. All 3 have also been charged with murder, but we have no motive as to why they did what they did. The security guard was described as a gentle giant by his friends, a lovable man who had never done anything mean to anyone. It appears he had been trying to keep the peace at the gym with 3 cruel ruffians who were jacked up on testosterone and resorted to violence. The only gym these 3 young men will be visiting now is the one in prison, where they won't be the only ones jacked up on testosterone. 4. Murdered by the homeless. Matthew Hurley was the manager of a gym in Montana who found himself in an argument with a homeless man in September of 2021. Matthew and his assistant manager at Fuel Fitness and Nutrition confronted a man who appeared to be homeless and sleeping in their parking lot on a Thursday morning. According to the assistant manager, also named Matthew, the homeless man began to complain about an unused gym membership that he wanted a refund for. Even though they were under absolutely no obligation to give him a refund for this apparent gym membership he owned, they did it anyway. That's the kind of good person and great manager Matthew Hurley was. But the homeless man didn't end things at the refund. After he got his money, he demanded more. He told Matthew and Matthew that he needed more cash and that no wasn't an option. When Matthew Hurley said no and that more money was going beyond what he was willing to do, things got dark, fast. Without hesitation, the homeless man said, "Okay, then you're going to die." He pulled out a gun and started shooting. Matthew was hit, but the assistant manager managed to run away to safety. A bystander who heard the shots ran to their vehicle and retrieved a firearm and got into a shootout with the homeless man. It was absolute anarchy. The bystander got shot, but so did the suspect. Both were taken to hospital, and Hurley was declared dead at the scene. 3. The horrible butchering of Molly McLaren. Molly McLaren was the tragic victim of an extreme act of wickedness. What happened to Molly should quite frankly never happen to anyone. She was butchered by her ex-boyfriend as she sat in her car on June 27, 2018. She wasn't just stabbed a little. Her crazed boyfriend, Joshua Stimson, knifed her 75 times in an outburst of uncontrollable mania. Molly had been working out at the gym when Joshua approached her. He had been stalking Molly ever since they split up 12 days previously. Molly was horrified that he had followed her to the gym, and so she quickly packed up her stuff and headed out to the parking lot. It was 10:45 in the morning. The very last thing she did was sit in her car and text her friends. She texted her mother saying that Joshua turned up at the gym and that she was scared. She also messaged some of her friends explaining the horror she was dealing with. What she didn't know was that Joshua was waiting with a pair of knives and a pickaxe. Joshua had been watching her from his own vehicle. When he saw his opportunity, he ran at her car, yanked open the door, and started stabbing. Molly tried to fight him off, but there was nothing she could do against the flurry of knife blows. She screamed, honked her horn, and was dead in minutes. There was no getting away for Joshua Stimson. He was arrested and brought to jail. At his trial, it took less than 3 hours for the jury to convict him of murder. He was given a sentence of 26 years. Although considering the circumstances, it doesn't seem like enough. 2. Crushed in Mexico. A woman in Mexico City was crushed to death by a 400-pound barbell. As if getting crushed by an extremely heavy bar of metal isn't terrible enough, it happened right in front of her young daughter. According to the New York Post, the 42-year-old mom was working out on a Monday at Fitness Sport in February of 2022. Just before she got in position, a large man had adjusted the plates on the barbell. The woman sat down on the bench, tried to lift the barbell, and immediately lost control of it. It fell from her hands and crushed her neck, snapping her head forward and killing her on the spot while her daughter screamed in horror. She was dead instantly, but her daughter and those nearby still struggled to get the barbell off her neck and perform basic first aid. What's really strange is that the woman, dressed in a sweatshirt with her hair down, didn't look like she was prepared to lift a whopping 400 pounds above her head. We don't know if she was unaware of how much weight was on the bar, if the man who had stacked the weight knew that she couldn't handle it, or what. Authorities in Mexico say the accident is still under investigation. 1. Snapped leg. It was in March of 2017 when a man snapped his knee on a leg press machine in the middle of his workout. Somebody was filming this guy at an Indian gym as he pushed hundreds of pounds on the leg press. It was pretty impressive. He was moving a lot of weight, and then his body decided to quit. His leg bent back the wrong way and snapped like someone had dropped a huge stone on a brittle twig. The victim was identified as Ambrish Patel, a regular at the gym. An employee of the gym said that after the incident, Ambrish was actually doing quite okay. He couldn't work out anymore, and it would take him 6 months to fully heal, but he should have normal use of his legs. That's extremely good news, considering just how bad this could have been.
Number 9. Daniel and Mary Barrett. In early 2020, 40-year-old Daniel Barrett and his wife, a 43-year-old Air Force veteran named Mary, got into an argument about Mary's alleged infidelity. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, Daniel bludgeoned and stabbed his life partner to death with a fireplace poker in the couple's Plymouth, Pennsylvania home. 2 days later, he walked into a local police station and confessed to the murder. Officers went to the home and followed a trail of blood leading into the basement, where they found Mary's lifeless body on the floor with a hole in her skull. An autopsy ruled her death a homicide by blunt force trauma. Daniel told investigators that he was angry with Mary for spending time with another man. He said that he punched her in the face and then blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he was standing over his gravely injured wife with a pair of fire tongs in his hands. The betrayed husband then proceeded to attack Mary with a fireplace poker and a knife. He dragged her into the basement and left her for dead, then returned the next day and covered her remains with a sheet. Daniel claimed that he considered committing suicide before he decided to do the right thing and turn himself in. He pled guilty to first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Number 8. Hunter and Summer Tatum. Things turned deadly for a young Alabama couple last year when 26-year-old Summer Tatum discovered text messages between her husband, Hunter, and another woman. A days-long argument ensued over Hunter's online infidelity and video gaming habits, and it ended with Summer being rushed to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Hunter had reportedly dialed 911 and confessed to opening fire on his wife, who was 6 months pregnant and had cerebral palsy. Doctors performed an emergency delivery of the couple's premature son, Everett, but neither mother nor baby survived. Chief Assistant District Attorney C.J. Robinson told Auction.com that Summer had gotten angry because Hunter was having an affair over his gaming console with someone in another country. When she found out, she destroyed her husband's console, which led to the argument that resulted in her death. Hunter allegedly told detectives that the pair had wrestled over a handgun and that it had accidentally discharged and fatally shot Summer. But the evidence tells a much different story of a husband shooting his wife twice in the back of the head, execution style, according to prosecutors, who charged Hunter with 2 counts of murder and are pursuing the death penalty. Home surveillance footage reportedly shows Summer pleading with her husband not to harm her or their baby and saying, "I'll stay, I'll stay." Moments later, he coldly shot her to death. Hunter is currently being held without bond as he awaits his arraignment. Number 7. Eric and Joyce Thompson. 34-year-old Eric Thompson found out in July of last year that his high school sweetheart and wife of 13 years, Joyce, was having an affair with their 47-year-old acupuncturist, John Tokuhara. Joyce abruptly ended the 2-month romance as soon as her husband found out about it. But that wasn't good enough for Eric. Just days before he and Joyce's 5th wedding anniversary, he drove to Tokuhara's acupuncture clinic in Waipahu on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. He carried a shopping bag inside before he allegedly pulled a gun out of the bag and shot his wife's secret lover 3 times. Surveillance footage reportedly revealed that Eric was inside the clinic for less than a minute before the fatal damage was done. Tokuhara's mother found his bullet-riddled body inside the clinic the next morning. At first, police were unsure who their suspect was. They narrowed their suspicions down to Thompson through the exhaustive process of tracking and interviewing 53 owners of white trucks, like the one they saw in the surveillance footage. As it turned out, Eric was the only vehicle owner who lacked an alibi for when the murder occurred, and the rest of the story's pieces fell into place from there. Police obtained even more surveillance footage and evidence that enabled them to establish a timeline of Thompson's whereabouts on the day of the murder. They also uncovered messages between Joyce and John, detailing how John wanted to continue the affair, only to be warned by Joyce to stay away or her husband might kill him. The pair had stopped communicating months before the deadly shooting. Tokuhara was recently arrested for second-degree murder and also faces numerous weapons charges. Number 5. Pierre Tyler and Andress Wofford. 29-year-old Andress Wofford's father knew something was wrong when his daughter never showed up at his home to pick up her child one day last year. Wofford's parents contacted the police, who went to the woman's apartment and found her dead from a fatal gunshot wound to the head. Detectives connected the bullet to a gun belonging to 29-year-old Chicago police officer Pierre Tyler, Wofford's boyfriend and the father of her child. Tyler claimed that he had left the weapon at Wofford's apartment, but investigators didn't buy the story. Not only were they unable to find the gun, but the victim's keys and cell phone were also missing. Tyler stuck to his story, claiming that he was at Wofford's home until 9 p.m. the night before she was found dead, and that she was still alive when he left to meet with a confidential informant for his job. But the officer's partners said that they weren't with him that night, and it would have been highly unusual for him to meet with an informant alone. Neighbors reported hearing the couple arguing prior to Wofford's death. In the early evening, she had reached out to family members, asking them to pick up her child from daycare. Later that night, Wofford's father received a text from her phone saying that she was on her way over. It was the last he ever heard from her. That night, nearby residents heard a muffled bang coming from the victim's apartment, and then the arguing stopped. The pair were apparently fighting because Tyler had had a child with another woman during his relationship with Wofford. She was upset because she found out he had an upcoming child support hearing and suspected him of secretly marrying the mother of his other child, according to the Chicago Sun-Times. The Chicago Police Department fired Tyler and charged him with first-degree murder. He is currently being held without bail. Number 4. Mona Haidari. Mona Haidari was only 12 years old when she was forced into an arranged marriage in the Iranian city of Avaz. By the time she was 17, she had a 3-year-old child. Her husband began to suspect her of adultery, and soon enough, her family also found out about the alleged affair. Knowing that she would most certainly die in what's known as an honor killing, the young woman fled to Turkey. Mona's father and husband tracked her whereabouts and brought her back to Iran, where her husband and brother-in-law murdered her. Deeply disturbing video footage showed the husband walking around with the slain woman's decapitated head in his hand. Police raided the family's hideout and arrested the 2 suspected killers. The brutal killing sparked widespread outrage among the public, prompting the country's Vice President for Women's Affairs, Enzi Kazali, to call on Parliament to enact measures against this alarming type of violence. Honor killings are prevalent throughout certain parts of Iran, where wives are often killed over cheating suspicions. Sadly, the law exempts husbands from punishment if they witness the wife cheating and murder her for it. Only a woman's immediate family can order the man's execution for killing her, and this, unfortunately, doesn't happen often due to the cultural belief that her alleged actions have brought dishonor to their reputation. Number 3. Thomas and Beths Sudds. While responding to a welfare check in 2019, police found 56-year-old Beth Alsop Sudds dead in a Waterford Township, California home. She suffered from severe head trauma and had been stabbed at least 20 times. Her husband, 74-year-old Thomas Sudds, attempted suicide the next day and survived. Inside the home, police found a note that Thomas had written, stating that Beth had driven him crazy with all her affairs. Police charged him with first-degree premeditated murder. The trial revealed that Thomas had mentally unraveled in the months leading up to his wife's death. He became obsessed with the idea that Beth was cheating on him. The defense argued that the man was plagued by a variety of mental illnesses, as well as adverse effects from the medications he was taking for these conditions, which they claim led to a temporary bout of insanity. But the prosecution refused to concede to this narrative, arguing that Thomas was driven to kill by pure jealousy and anger. And it appeared as though the jury agreed. Thomas was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 2. Eric Mound and Holly Williams. Texas businessman Eric Mound was willing to pay a high price to get rid of his former mistress and her new boyfriend. He allegedly paid $750,000 to 3 hitmen to kidnap and murder the pair after they threatened to expose the married tycoon's affair. 33-year-old Holly Williams and her partner, 36-year-old William Lanway, were found dead in the woman's crashed car in early 2020. The vehicle had veered down an embankment and hit a tree, but the couple were not killed in what appeared at first to be a deadly accident. They had both been shot in the head. Police finally arrested Mound in late 2021. In what seemed to be a routine traffic stop, they pulled him over and charged him with conspiracy to commit kidnapping resulting in death, and using a firearm in relation to a violent crime. The 3 alleged hitmen, who are all former military members, were also arrested on the same charges. Mound is accused of paying the trio a hefty 6-figure sum to travel from Austin to Tennessee to carry out his plans with the couple. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the crime is that one of the suspects, 47-year-old Gilad Peled, owned a company called Spirit Security, which helped clients respond to extortion demands. After the job was done, Mound wrote a raving review on the company's website, describing Spirit as professional and commending its expedited services. Number 1. Arona and Sandra Pen Amina. Arona Pen Amina began to suspect his 29-year-old wife Sandra of cheating on him in 2016. He confronted her, and the allegations erupted into a violent argument that ended with Arona stabbing Sandra and bashing her in the head with a concrete post. She died from her injuries inside their Queensland, Australia home. An autopsy determined that she had been stabbed 29 times, indicating that her husband had murdered her in an unchecked fit of rage. Arona received a life sentence for murder in 2018, but the case wound up going back to trial. A jury accepted the man's argument that he had been provoked by Sandra's alleged infidelity and found him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. This time around, Arona was handed a much lighter sentence of just 16 years. The retrial's outcome sparked outcries among activists, lawmakers, and politicians who believe it's wrong for the law to go easy on someone due to so-called provocation. In other words, people are outraged that Arona fought his way out of a murder charge by arguing that his wife's alleged cheating had triggered his rage, thereby making him less responsible for his brutal reaction. But until the law changes, it unfortunately is what it is, and he'll be a free man by the time he reaches his mid-60s. Thanks for watching. If you had to choose, would you rather try to forgive your partner for cheating or spend the next 15 years single? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!